the record button here so that way I have this recorded for y'all. So today is going to be our first dive into Revit. The building we're making, just for you guys to see it, even though we're not really going to follow it to a T necessarily from what's in these drawings, because I've also intentionally have only given you drawings where it's just showing the structure itself. I'm not going to use any very strict measurements when it comes to it. I'm going to just kind of eyeball things. I will show you how to make measurements and put dimensions in there. But my intention with this assignment is for you to kind of just get a feel for the different tools and how the different tools work. And as we were kind of discussing with many things in AutoCAD and things with SketchUp, Revit is much, or not as much in the same, but a little bit of the same as there's not necessarily one right way to do it. You could do keyboard shortcuts, you could do buttons. I'm going to try to force myself to do keyboard shortcuts so I can learn them a bit better, because if I don't force myself to use them, then I'm never going to memorize them. And like there can be a few different ways that you can at least approach like the workflow in Revit. We're going to do a lot of things right now generic, but we could really define things as we are making the building or define things later. The really great thing with Revit is it's pretty easy to make changes and alterations. If we want to alter a door, or if we want to move a window, if we want to change the whole size of a room, moving things around is pretty easy. And since it's all in that one linked model, if I make the change in the floor plan, it'll get updated in the elevations, which is fantastic of the fact that those are things that we no longer have to track because the computer's doing it for us. And I can't wait for 10 years later now when Revit is obsolete and I have to learn an entirely new software to figure it out. So I know I had mentioned I was going to be doing this in Revit 2024. I'm actually going to do it in 23 along with you guys, just to kind of help make maybe these videos a little bit easier to do. So here we are on our blank Revit home screen. We are going to start a new model. So keep in mind there are new families and new models. We want to do a new model. And then I'm going to use a default template, which isn't one that's necessarily in here. If I go into the browse folder, I should be able to find a nice default template. I like the default one because it has the least amount of information installed on it. If I was doing something when it comes to like engineering the structure and calculating the loads, I'd want to do a structural template, but I'm just going to do this default one. And then I want to make sure that I'm creating a new project, not a new project template. So I want to make sure that I'm saying new project. And then we'll click OK and we'll let it start. And another thing too is I know I am recording this and I'm going to put it up on As You Learn afterwards. Please feel free to stop me at any time though today and say, hey, show that again. I'm not going to beat you. I'd lose my job if I did. So please ask. So when we open up a brand new drawing, we are put into the level 1 floor plan. So it's bolded over here in my project browser, as well as then I know it's a floor plan because of the fact that it has these little symbols here. These are pre-made cameras and pre-made symbols for our elevation views. So once we actually start placing views on sheets, these are going to fill in automatically with the information about the view number and the sheet number. And if we change the sheet number, this will update for us automatically too. So it's really nice that everything's going to be linked within there. We also want to try to draw everything inside those little cameras. They can be moved, so we can like window over them and we can move them around if we need to. But we always want to try to draw just within those 4. The first thing we're going to do with our building or with our floor plan is we are going to create some walls for it, because I can't put any windows in, I can't put any doors in if I don't have walls to start off with. And so if we look at our first floor just here, I've got some thicker walls here for these exteriors. I've got a little bit of a thinner wall for an interior. They're just this generic gray blobs. There's not a whole lot to them. We could define them, and I'm thinking next week on Monday we might go in and play around with some of those different settings, or maybe we'll even do that tomorrow. And I also have what's here called a curtain wall. So a curtain wall is essentially a glass wall or a windowed wall. We use the same tool to put it in, but we just have to define things kind of a little bit differently as we go. So any wild guesses as to which button at the top I would use to place a wall? The tool that says wall. And it's the first one of our list because, you know, it's going to be a pretty important tool in the entire program. The keyboard shortcut for wall is WA to start a wall. And anytime you start a command, you usually have to hit escape twice in order to completely end the command. And it's also going to alter your toolbar here at the top with a couple of different settings and a couple of different features within it. So when I started the wall tool, my toolbar is now changed into this modify bar regarding walls and how to place them. And I have a couple of settings here that we're not going to get into right at the moment, but later on we'll use some of them up. And we also then have the ability to define how we're drawing the wall, whether we're doing it through just lines, through a rectangle, through a polygon. If we wanted to make a curved wall, we could do that. When we're doing floors, roofs, pretty much anything else, this bar is always going to pop up. It's going to look a little bit different depending on what exactly though we're making. So when we're making a roof, the toolbar is going to adjust a little bit because roofs and walls are two different things. We also have a couple of quick settings here that can help us define things related to our walls. Most notably, we can change its height of where it's going up to. Right now, it's sitting at an unconnected height of 20 feet. So it's saying that this wall isn't connected to anything. It's just going up 20 feet in the air. And we can also define where we're taking measurements from when we place it. So we could do it based on the wall center, the core, which we can define as like only being like our structural element, our stud. We could do it based off of faces of the finish, faces of the core. We could do a couple of different things. I always leave the chain linked. So that just means once I finish one wall, it will just let me start drawing another one off of it. But there could be a scenario where you need to uncheck that one. And then in our properties bar too, we have a couple of settings. All of the settings that are up here in this little green bar exist here in the properties bar. It's just kind of taken the really important ones and put them here. If I want to change the type of wall I'm doing, I would click here in the properties bar to say if I want a generic 8-inch wall or a generic 12-inch wall. There are a few predefined wall types in here. So we have like a couple of these interior partitions in here. If I scroll up, there are a few of these exterior ones, but I don't want to use any of those just yet. I am going to just use a generic 8-inch for my outside. And then we also have that height relation here. So it currently is just saying that this wall is going 20 feet in the air. We actually want to change that to say that I want this wall to go up to level 2. So instead, it's going to make this wall go from level 1 where we're starting just up to level 2. So I could change that here in the properties bar, or I could have adjusted it up here. This apply button means absolutely nothing because the second I move my cursor out of this box, it applies whatever I've changed. So frankly, I don't know why that apply button even exists because it doesn't need to be there, but nevertheless, he's there. So now to start placing my walls and making walls or drawing my building out, I need to click somewhere to start, move my cursor in the direction I want to go. If I'm zoomed in really close, it'll let me do like a little bit smaller increments with that witness dimension that's popping up. I could type in something right now if I wanted to. So if I had a specific mount I wanted to make this wall, I could type 30, enter, and Revit is thinking feet. So if I just type 30, Revit's going to assume 30 feet. If I wanted to go down 15 feet 4 inches, I could just do 15 space 4 because Revit is going to assume the first number's feet, the last number's inches. So I can type specific amounts in. It's sort of similar to AutoCAD in which we point our cursor in the direction we want to go. We type the amount we want, we hit enter, or we can also just point and click. We don't have to necessarily type. Once I'm all done, the really nice thing with Revit, again, being a software that understands that this is a building, is that it's going to automatically put an inside and an outside to this wall, and it's going to trim those walls together automatically for us, so we don't have to worry about that, which is pretty darn fantastic. And if I wanted to change anything about any of these walls, I could hit escape twice. And then if I wanted to change this wall, instead of this being 30, I wanted it 40, I could either click on this number and I could just type 40, and now the building's 40 feet, or I could drag that wall around. One thing I often like to do is use the arrow keys on my keypad or on my keyboard to just kind of nudge like things into place, particularly when we get to like staircases and stuff. I often just sit there like nudging them around. But for the time being, again, you don't have to have any specific amounts. I'm just making a generic box. Yeah?
Just to confirm, those dimensions are to the center of the wall?
Those are centered, yeah, so that's from center to center is where these witnesses always come out from.
Okay.
If I wanted to move it, I could grab this. When I hover over that little dot, it says move witness, and I could move it to the outside by then hovering over it and hitting tab. And so now that's measuring to the outside. And then I just got to hit tab when I go over it.
And more often when you do interiors, we're interior, so a lot of times you'll measure a space inside.
So you could even then, you can move that witness to the inside. I really don't rely too heavily on these witness dimensions because after I get the building kind of shaped how I want, I go in with the dimension tool afterwards and I measure stuff out. And then as you place dimensions, you can then move the features, particularly to make those like construction friendly numbers is what I always call them. You don't want to make something 7/8 of an inch, just go the full inch. No one's going to notice, and every contractor is going to hate you if you're just like, it's 15/16. Please make it 15/16. They're also if I was that contractor, I wouldn't listen to your 15/16. I'm making it a full inch. Because that would be weird. I'd be like, why? So I've got our beautiful, gorgeous rectangle. If we want to look at it 3-dimensionally, I can click on this little house button up here, this little default 3D view, and it's just going to show me my building or my house 3-dimensionally. If I want to orbit around, I can hold the shift key and the scroll wheel, and I can orbit to see it. But again, it's nothing too beautiful at the time being because it's just some random box. I can also adjust its visual style, which is something I typically do in the 3D view. And that is this little oblique cube down here. So within that cube, we can change if we want something to be in just black and white, which is what it currently is. So it's currently in hidden line. I usually opt for either the shaded or the consistent colors option. Because within these two options, I still get color cues. The realistic one tends to really lag the computer out. So unless you have a very, very beefy computer, I don't recommend going into realistic mode when you're looking at something 3-dimensionally. We can also pan around too by just holding down our scroll wheel. We've got our beautiful, beautiful level 1. If I want to go back into my level 1 floor plan, a couple of ways I could do it just from this view. I could double click on that little target, that little spot elevation, and that brings me into my level 1 floor plan. I could also click on it up here because of the fact that Revit is tracking all of the different tabs I have open. So I could just go back and forth between my open tabs, or I could double click on it in the project browser to go from one level to another one. So a couple of different ways I could get around. Is one of them the right way? No. I'm gonna do another wall for my like little interior bit here. I think it's supposed to be a bathroom or something, but we're not actually, well, I guess we could put a toilet in it if we wanted. So to get back into the wall tool, I'll either click on it in the top corner or I'll use the keyboard shortcut WA. Because this is gonna be an interior wall, I'm gonna wanna make it a little bit thinner because interior walls usually are gonna be framed out of like a thinner material. So if I wanted to change my wall type, again, I just click on here in my properties bar, and then I can adjust it to be like the generic 5-inch wall. Because right now I just want to do everything in a generic style. I don't want to define too much just yet. When I go to start placing this wall, it'll also, while I hover over here, it's giving me, again, just kind of a little witness dimension of like how far down I'm going. Keep in mind, these are always going from middles to middles. But I'll just say, I want to go from here to here. And again, it's trimming everything out for us as we place everything. So we don't have to worry about that. And if I decided I wanted to move this wall down, I could hit escape a bunch of times. I can adjust it and everything else adjust with it because of the fact that this is all just one linked model. And because Revit understands those architectural standards that go into the drawing, it's taking so much of that tedious work of AutoCAD away from us, which is like very, very cool. You guys might not think it's very, very cool, but it is very, very cool. Last thing then that we'll do for our walls, at least in our level 1 floor plan, and actually too, if I go back into the wall tool, you'll see here that my top constraint, I actually didn't have to set it for those 2 interior walls because Revit remembered the last time I made this a wall, I had to go up to level 2. Revit's gonna assume that I'm gonna have it go up to level 2 unless I say otherwise. So it already remembered that and I could just keep using it over and over. Next, I'll put in my little curtain wall piece here, my little like sunroom glassed in area that was sitting on the back side of the building over here. So the curtain wall tool is in the wall command, so it's still just within here, or keyboard shortcut WA. And then if I change my wall type in my properties bar, if I scroll down, I have some curtain wall options. And the one that I like to use in scenarios like this is this storefront curtain wall, because I find it to be the easiest one. It kind of establishes a grid to go along with it. We can make our own custom grid within a curtain wall if we want to. But I'm just going to use the storefront one, and I'm just going to go from this endpoint. I'll go out a couple of feet. And it's also like, see when I just am hovering down here, it's showing me that, hey, if you stop, you're matched up with where this wall is. Because Revit's going to assume that that's what I want to do. It's not forcing me, but it's just kind of snapping there for me. And I've now made a little glassed-in area, which we can look at again in a 3D view. If I go back into my 3D up here, I have this cool little sunroom area gridded out. No way to get into it yet because I don't have any doors or windows, but I guess a window would be weird to put here, but I could climb in through the window. But we'll get to that part. So I want to just focus on purely walls for the time being. So then we're going to do some walls for our second level. Now, in the default template, we have a level 1 and we have a level 2. And so we set our level 2 to be our top constraint for level 1. The problem we're going to run into right now is we don't have a level to set a top constraint for our roof, from where our walls are going from level 2 to our roof line. And even then, let's say I was making a building that had more than just 2 levels. That's not very convenient that I only have 2 floor plans here or I only have 2 levels. So of course, we can make additional levels. You can only make new levels when you are in either an elevation view or a section view. You have to be in a view that's showing something two-dimensionally through the height. So when we're in the floor plan tool or the floor plan view, the level button is grayed out. It doesn't exist. And even then in the 3D view, it's also grayed out. It doesn't exist. So I have to go into one of my elevation views in order to place a level. I can do that by just double clicking on any one of these 4 down here. Or if I wanted to as well, I could double click on the elevation marker in the floor plan, and that'll bring me, in this case, I'm looking at my west elevation. It's nothing beautiful to look at by any means. My south one at least is a little bit more interesting, but my goal of this building was not necessarily to make it beautiful. And then we have these levels right here. So we have level 1, we have level 2. We could change the heights of them if we wanted, which is one of the reasons I always set a top constraint. Because if I wanted level 2 to now be 20 feet tall, I could just click on that number and I could say 20, and it adjusted the walls along with it because of the fact that I have a constraint to just always be with level 2. I'm going to Control Z to undo that because I want to leave level 2 at a 10-foot amount. We can also rename the levels if we want. So if I click on the level name and then hover over it while it has that box, I can click on it and I can rename it. I always name mine with a number system in front of it. And the reason why I do that, so I'm just going to call this 00 ground, is because in the list here in the project browser, it puts them alphabetically. And so then if I have ground floor, upper floor, second floor, then alphabetically they might not be in order in here, and that bugs me. So if I put a number beforehand, it keeps them in order of from the lowest level to the highest one. I'm going to also rename this one then. I'm just going to click on it, hover over until I get that box. I'm going to call this one upper level. I'll just even call it, no, I'll call it upper level. I'm going to say I could just call it upper. The name you give it has no function on how it works. So you can name it anything you want. And then if I wanted to add in an additional level for my roof, I can either click on this button up here for levels. I think it's a little bit larger on your guys' screens because my resolution's a little less. Or keyboard shortcut LL will make a new level. What I usually do is eyeball it into place for where I want it to be. And I always start going left to right. I don't have it at the right height now. It's okay. I'll change it in a second. The reason why I do left to right is because I like these spot elevations to match up. And so if I do Control Z and I go right to left, the head is over here, and that bugs me. It could be fixed because of these little check boxes. So I could uncheck to have it be symbolized over there, check to put it over here. So we can move it, we can change it. It can be fixed or adapted. Height-wise, I want to put it at 20 feet, and I currently have it at 26 feet, 6 inches. So I could change that number. I could click on this witness dimension here, and I could just say 10 foot from the level that it was sitting above. Or I could have clicked on this number here to change it too. So, bunch of ways to change it. I'm just going to call this one level 02 roof. So that way I have something to match my level 2 walls up to for a top constraint. And I could keep adding on levels and levels and levels depending on the size of the building I want. You can also do like an array of levels to just put a bunch in all at once. If you're gonna have a 60-story building, you could click each time and make them go across, but that's a little annoying. So there are ways to do that. So now I'm gonna go into my upper level floor plan over here. I can't choose it from my list up here since I haven't ever opened up this upper level floor plan. There's no tab up here for it. This is only the tabs that I've opened in this current session. And I could open it up by double clicking here, or I can double click too on that spot elevation and it opens it up. When I go into the upper level plan, what it is showing me is a half-toned or grayed out version of the first level. And that's helpful in this scenario, because especially if I have load-bearing walls that I need to carry up onto the second story, I know exactly where they are. If I need to just know where my exterior dimensions are, I know where everything is. In the case of our building, our second story is actually like cantilevered a little bit out on all of the sides. So not incredibly helpful for us, but we could even use it to trace over if we want to keep things nice and even with it. So on my level 2, I'm going to start my upper level. I'll try to call them what I have them named here. I'm going to start my wall tool, which again is keyword shortcut WA, or that button here. I'm going to draw a curtain wall with a base constraint of my upper level and a top constraint of level 2. So it's going from my upper level up to that 20-foot mark. And I'm just going to draw a curtain wall straight down here, because I do have one sitting right in line here, and then the other ones are kind of cantilevered out a little bit. I might need to expand it down a little bit more, but once we find out how much we want to cantilever it, we'll figure that out when we get to that bridge. And then I'll hit escape a bunch of times to end the command. I'm going to go back into the wall tool. So keyboard shortcut WA, or the button that says wall. And I'm going to switch myself over to the generic 8-inch wall. And a few ways I could go about making these walls out here. One could be that I just kind of eyeball how far out I want it to go. Like, let's say I want like a 2.5-foot one, and then I can just make a wall that goes down to here, go out 2.5 feet, make a wall that goes to here, come out 2.5 feet, wall to here, and then it actually comes out a little bit more too on this side. This is going to be a little covered deck over here, but I'll pull those out. That's one way I could go about figuring out where these walls go. Another thing, so if I hit escape and I just click on these walls, and the delete key, just like AutoCAD, is how you get rid of things, if I haven't mentioned that. Another thing I could do in the wall tool is I could use this offset. So if I know that I want to do walls that are 2.5 feet out on all sides, I could do an offset of 2.5 feet. And then when I could just go and click on these walls, it's automatically going to place the wall 2.5 feet away from where I am drawing. One thing about Revit is it wants you to draw in like a clockwise motion. So if I was to go counterclockwise, technically it's now 2.5 feet in, which is kind of weird. I don't know why they expect us to memorize that. I can also use this option called pick walls, where I have that offset, and I could just say, put a wall here, put a wall here, put a wall here. And then I could use a join to join them. So this is in that modify tool, I have trim and extend to corner, where I could just say, make those walls meet, make those walls meet. So how would I probably go about it? I'd probably just draw them, the 3 of them. But I want to show you that options exist. And at some point, you'll use that tool. So then I'm going to, actually, well, I'll do a trim and extend to corner 2 for this curtain wall to bring this curtain wall out. Which, oh, that was ugly. There we go. So even if you've already closed out of the command entirely, if you click on the curtain wall or click on any of these walls, this modify toolbar will come up, and we have the trim to corner where you can click on the 2 pieces you want to put together. So I'll undo. It's this button here. I want these 2 to meet. I want these 2 to meet. Will this now let me drag this out though? We'll find out. So I'll hit escape a trillion billion times to get out of the command. I'm just going to click on this wall and I'm going to drag the wall end out. So yes, it did. So I was just able to kind of just pull on that grip. When I pulled it all the way in here, I'm getting a warning saying, hey, originally you told us to keep these corners together. I can't keep these corners together if this wall is too short. All it's really telling me is like, did you do that by accident or do you want to unjoin them? So a lot of times those warnings pop up and students completely ignore what the heck they're saying, and they're actually saying some pretty helpful stuff. So I just pulled this one out an amount. I have no idea how much I did. If you want to put it a specific amount, go for it. If I want to take this wall and pull it out the same amount, again, I'm just going to click on that grip to drag its end, and it'll tell me if these 2 are lined up with each other. Additionally, what I could do is I could use one of my favorite tools out there called Align. Align is right up here. It's this little graph in the modify toolbar, or it's keyboard shortcut AL. And what I can do with Align is I could say, I want this edge. You can see a little bit that it's getting highlighted blue. And this edge to meet with each other. Because one of the things I love with Align is that I can lock things into alignment. And if I click on that lock, what that means is if I hit escape a bunch of times to end the command, if I move this wall, the other wall moves with it. So if I want to make my just porch a little bit wider, I can do that. I find Align particularly helpful when dealing with things like doorways in a hall, because if you place one of them, you can align them together, and then if something needs to get shifted with one door, at least the other doors are going to come along with it. So you don't have to go and replace every single one of those doors in there. And now I'm going to look at my building 3D again. Look how gorgeous it is. It's stunning. She's beautiful. Wow. Breathtaking. So we have a few more interior walls sitting in here in our level 2, or excuse me, our upper level. So I'm just going to have an interior wall. I'm going to whack it somewhere around there. And then I have another wall to split those into 2. And that is the technical term of whacking a wall into place. So I'm going to go into my wall tool. Again, that's in the architecture tab at the top, or keyboard shortcut WA. And it was like about here-ish, which, whoops, I forgot to change my wall type, but I can fix it. So I placed these walls here, and then I realized, like, oh crud, I made these generic 8-inch walls, and I wanted them to be generic 5-inch walls. That doesn't mean I have to completely erase them or get rid of them. All I have to do is hit escape, and I can click on this wall, and I can then just come change its size after the fact. So I can make those adjustments afterwards. If you do something, it can most likely be salvaged or saved within this software. It's another one of the many, many things that I love about this software, is that we have the ability to kind of go around and play around and change things up. At this point, I no longer need this halftone version of the building underneath. It's not going to serve me or help me in any way, shape, or form. So I want to make sure I hit escape a bunch of times and my floor plan is back, or my properties bar is back to just saying I'm looking at the floor plan. And I'm going to scroll about halfway down in there until I see the word underlay. And all I'm going to do is then turn the range for the underlay to none. So I'm going to click on none and then move my cursor out of there, and it just makes the first floor plan go bye-bye because I don't need it anymore. So next of what we can do is we've got all of our walls. Revit is wonderfully reminding me, for you guys, it should be coming up in like a minute or two. Revit is saying, you haven't saved this in like 30 minutes. You want to save what you've worked on, bestie? And I'm like, sure do. Thanks a lot, Revit. If that little thing doesn't pop up, though, we can just manually save. We can click on our little floppy disk up here to save it. Make sure you know where you are saving it. So you should be putting it on your flash drive. So that's up here. You can say, where am I saving it? Since this is my desktop or my laptop, I'm just going to put mine on the desktop for now. And we're going to name it BSC 1210. Last name in all caps. First name lowercase. Dash. And we're going to call this Revit Res, because this is going to be our Revit residential practice. One thing you're going to notice too on your flash drive is Revit is going to save a bunch of different versions of this file. It's going to say like 0001, 0002, 0003. It's making automatic backups kind of as you're working in case it crashes, which is also another pretty handy thing, so that this way you know you only lost 15 minutes of work versus 2 hours of work. You can delete those after like you've closed out of a file and you're like, there's just so much on your flash drive, you can feel free to get rid of all those 000s. But they're at least helpful to have when you're working. So now I'm ready to add in some doors. So we're gonna put in some pretty ugly basic doors in here. We'll even do a kind of a fancy door within the curtain wall. So up at the top in your toolbar is a tool called door, and that's gonna be how you add a door in. Or it's keyboard shortcut DR for doors. So when we go into the door tool, again, our toolbar up at the top completely changes. We have this now modify toolbar, and our properties bar is also telling us about the type of door we are currently putting in. So we are putting in a very boring door. It's just this single flush door, and it has a couple of different sizes to it. And it is the only door that is currently loaded into this project. There are other doors available. They are just not in this project at the moment. If we wanted a different one, what we could do is, while in the door tool, come up here and load in a new family. So I'm going to click on load family, and that takes me to this big old pile of folders. Eventually, you will start to memorize what are in this pile of folders. It's unfortunate, but it's true. They are in alphabetical order as well, if that's any consolation to help you. But we want to go look at the doors. So we're going to go into the door folder. So I'll double click on door. If I want to get a preview of what a door looks like before I actually load it into my project, I can click on it once and it'll show me the door here. And I often use my arrow keys on my keyboard to just kind of shuffle through the different door options. There are also in here too a couple other folders. So like there's this commercial folder, this residential folder, where we have even more options. What door does it matter that we pick? Does not matter. I'm just gonna pick a door. I kind of liked this like double glass door. I kind of like that one, so I'm just gonna load that one in. You don't have to. It's the one I want. This is gonna be my house. Once I want to load this door in, I'm just gonna click on open. And it's giving me options of like what sizes do I want to open in there. So I'm gonna load in this one that's 6 foot wide, 6 foot 8 inches tall. And I'll say okay. And now I have this door loaded in. It's only ever gonna show up if I'm on top of a wall, because this is a wall-based component. It has to be placed inside of a wall. I can't just have the door hanging out here. If I want to change which way this door swings, I can do that based on when I hover over on either side. Or even if I place it and I don't like the way it's swinging, I do have the option to change it with those little arrows. So I can just flip it. And the beautiful thing is that Revit has already trimmed it out into place. It even has the line weight, so we had to apply different layers. We had a different layer for our wall, for the door swing. Those were all 3 different layers. Revit's taking care of all of those line weights for us because it understands the symbols that needs to be there. I'll put another one over here to let me into my little sunroom. And like this would also be a scenario where, in the case of these 2 double doors, wouldn't it make sense if they were lined up with each other? And so I can use my handy dandy align tool up here to say I want the center of this door and the center of this door to just be lined up. And then I'll need to place another door here into my bathroom. A double door of glass wouldn't make sense necessarily for this bathroom here. So I'm going to go back into my architecture tab, back into the door tool. And this again is I can change my door type just like I could change my wall type. Is I can change my door type to the size I want and the height I want. If there's a size and height, like a width and a height that I want, but it doesn't exist in this list, I can make my own custom one. So let's say I just really want a 32-inch wide door and a 6 foot 8 inch tall. For whatever reason, that doesn't exist in this list here. They only have 32-inch wide, 7 foot tall. So what I can do, if I needed it to be this particular size, is I could come here to edit type, and I can change its height and its width. My recommendation is anytime you're in these parameters and you're editing them is to create a duplicate before you make any changes. So that way you still have the original one. So I'm gonna make a duplicate. The name you give it doesn't matter, but I usually like to just name things what they are so that way I can identify them easier. So I'm just gonna call my duplicate 32-inch by 80-inch. And then I'm just gonna come to the height in these dimensions, and I'm gonna change the door height to 6 foot 8. And again, keep in mind that you don't have to put any feet or inches indicators in there. You can, it's not gonna stop anything, but Revit's always gonna think this first number is feet, this next number is inches. And now I have a door that's 32 inches wide and 6 foot 8 tall. Again, to place it, depending on which side you hover over, will help to find the swing. You can also use your space bar to flip the swing around too. And you can adjust it after the fact. So once you place the door, if you don't like the way it's swinging, you can change it. So typically in you would always want a door to be in the corner opening there. In this bathroom though, I wouldn't say it would be a bad idea to have the door open that way, so that maybe the toilet's kind of hidden behind it since it's such a tiny room. I might even just need to make this bathroom a little larger. But we're also not actually building this house, so it'll be okay. And then on the upper level, so I'm going to double click for the upper level floor plan, or I could switch it up here. I'm going to go back into my door tool, which is keyboard shortcut DR, or this button here. And then I'm just going to place 2 doors into these rooms as well. The space bar can flip the door swing, or you can use those arrows to flip the door swing. And then once you're done with the command, you hit escape about 1 billion trillion times. And if I look at it 3-dimensionally, we can even then see our doors sitting in there. Then the next thing I'm going to add are my windows. There is the typical way to add windows, and then there's also kind of a different way that I sometimes like to do windows. I think they look a little bit nicer when it comes to like renderings and things. So I'll show you kind of both ways that I tend to like to do windows. One is with the window tool up here. What a surprise and shocker that this button here called window places windows in. It is keyboard shortcut WN, and like the doors, there's only a few types of windows. We do have more options when it comes to our windows, but there's a few windows in here. There's a couple of fixed ones. There's some casements. There's some double hungs. If I wanted more windows, I would have to come here into load family, and I'd have to load more of them in. I'm just going to use this default fixed one that they've given me here. And then again, when I go try to place a window, it's giving me a little no symbol because I have to be on a wall in order to place it. And you'll notice too that I get a couple of little witness lines about where I'm putting it because they're assuming like you want to put that centered in this room. That would probably make sense. And I'm saying, you're right, that would make sense if I centered it here. And like I can put a couple of more windows around here. Let's say I want like 4 sitting here. Yeah?
I have a question. That center in that room went from the center of
Sure.
an exterior wall, which is thicker, to the center of an interior wall, which is thinner, so it would not actually be centered in the room.
Yeah, but we then would have our dimensions to go place it. But
But do you see what I'm saying? So you would have to shift it.
yeah, I wouldn't notice when I go in there. You would notice though, Ingrid. I wouldn't. I wondered if these aren't centered on the wall. Neither are those two.
This is another wall.
I think the ceiling tiles are centered, if that's any help for you. Stained, but centered. And if we look at it 3-dimensionally, we've got our windows sitting. How beautiful, how great. On the other side of the second floor, I'm going to show you the other way that I sometimes do windows that I think sometimes just looks better, particularly in like a building like this where it's a little bit more of like a modernist looking building. So what I do is I make a curtain wall. So I'm going to go into the wall tool and I'm going to change my wall type to a curtain wall 1. Then For my base constraint, I actually give it a base offset of whatever my sill height is. So if I want like a 2-foot sill of my window, I'll give this base constraint a base offset of 2 feet. So it's just saying that this wall, this curtain wall that I'm making, is starting 2 foot above the floor. And then for my top constraint of this wall, I'm going to set it to unconnected, and then the unconnected height right underneath that, I'm going to say that I want it to be like 4 foot 8 inches. So I'm just pretty much defining where is the sill of my wall and then how tall is my window. Then I'm just going to go place a wall inside of this wall. It's going to give me an error if I go and say I want a wall sitting from here to here, because it's saying these walls overlap. What are you doing? You just put a wall inside this wall. And I'll say I want like another one here and another one here. I'm just making them random sizes. Because what I can do is I can cut those out of this wall. So I'm going to use this handy dandy tool called Cut Geometry. It wouldn't go away when I click on it. Cut, click on the wall I want to keep, the thing I want to cut out of it. The wall I want to keep, the thing I want to cut out of it. And so when we look at it three-dimensionally, I have windows here, but they just don't have like necessarily all of that framing detail. The wall I want to keep, the thing I want to cut out of it. And what I could do too in the architecture tab is I could add mullions or I could add frames to it. So I could use this mullion tool to attach to just all of the grids, and I could just like put a frame around it. I think and this is kind of just my opinion, I think it looks better in the floor plan as a window symbol than kind of these ones. Maybe you're like, Dinah, I can't tell the difference between either of them. And what I really like about it is in renderings, I think this especially is going to have like a little bit more of a modern look because it's also going to have like a steel casing around this, rather an aluminum, not a steel. So it's just a different way that you could necessarily show a window. What it would cause an issue with is if you're going to use the schedules to do like, how many windows do I have to purchase? Because these aren't going to be put into a window schedule because they're not technically windows. They're just little weird walls that I put in. But especially like if I've got to do like something where I just am like, if I stretch this window out to make it like a really big like one, it's going to look really weird. You could. So if I wanted, and now I know I'm getting a little bit on a little rant, so I'll make another one here that I just do like really big. And I do my cut tool to cut it out. If I wanted to split that one, I could use this grid system here and I could even cut it into different panes of glass. Because like realistically, I'm probably not getting a 10-foot pane of glass. And then like I've got my little picture window. Does it look weird here with these ones sitting next to it? Yes. This whole building looks a little weird. Okay, we've got a couple of more windows too we'll put on level 1. If you want to do like windows nicely like I did do in this example here, I like took a little bit of time and effort to like make pretty windows. I'm definitely not making pretty windows today. I would actually place those windows in an elevation view because if I go into my south elevation, I now can see these windows here. And when I go into my window tool, I can place, like if I wanted these windows to match up, I'll just place 4 random ones, and then I'll come use the align tool to say, I want the edge of this window and the edge of this window to be lined up. I want the edge of this one and the edge of this one to be lined up. Seems like I somehow eyeballed that perfectly on each of these. This one I definitely didn't because I wanted to show how it would shift it. So unfortunately I had eyeballed them all in place. Putting the windows in an elevation view makes them show up in the floor plan view. So I didn't place these at all in my floor plan. Here they are though. They're also then here in my 3D just view and all. These windows I accidentally put in inside out, it looks like. So I could easily just flip them around using my space bar. So I could just click on them and flip them. So that way that little sill is sitting inside. And if I really wanted to, if I did want to use these windows, but I just don't like the fact that they have that wood trim sitting around them, I can absolutely come here into edit type, and I could edit things about like what everything's made out of. So I can change some of the materials in there, but I kind of don't want to get too much into that on day one. Then we've got to put a floor in. And so in the architecture tab, there is a button to place a floor. There is no keyboard shortcut for floor. You can define your own keyboard shortcuts if you want though. So if you wanted to make one yourself, you absolutely could. Also, by the way, if at any point you close out of this properties bar, I don't recommend you do it, but you can open it back up with PP. That's a pretty fun command there. So if you do PP, you can make it go away or come back. You can also right-click within this area, any one of these just drawing space areas, and you could get the properties back or away. Same thing with the project browser. I don't recommend you close out of it ever, but I do understand that it happens sometimes on accident. And so if you right-click, we have browsers, project browser. So you could bring it back that way. This one I feel is one that students accidentally X out of a lot. PP brings it back. Or I could go into the View tab, User Interface, and I could bring it back. This is also where you can find a whole list of the keyboard shortcuts. So in the View tab under User Interface, it has every single command and what its keyboard shortcut is going to be too. But back to making a floor. So to make a floor, I'm going to start the floor tool. When I go into floor, my toolbar changes up again, but this time it has a feature that it didn't have when I made a wall. So it has this little X or this green check. That means I cannot close out of this without me either saying, please make my floor, or don't make my floor. So for our first level, if I go back into it, we're just going to use kind of this big, almost building pad like slab of concrete. That's going to be our just level 1 floor. And then we'll put a generic floor onto our second story. So typically what we're going to use to make floors is this option here, this pick wall tool. But we're not going to use that in this scenario. Instead, we're going to use the rectangle option, so that this way we can just draw our big deck for our rectangle. I want my floor to sit as just a big rectangle around the building. What size did I make it? I have no idea. I just made a big rectangle. It's also not even on either side. I apologize, Ingrid. We can change our floor type if we want. So like, I'm just gonna make it one of these concrete options. I'll do lightweight concrete on metal deck, sure. And then once I'm all done with my floor, I need to hit this green check to actually make a floor. If I don't, when I go back into the architecture tab, everything's grayed out and it won't let me select it because I'm still creating a floor boundary. So I'll hit this green check and now I've made a floor. One thing Revit does, which sometimes is helpful and sometimes isn't, is that it applies hatch patterns for us automatically. So it knows that this is concrete, and it knows that the surface pattern for concrete is supposed to be these little dots. That's wonderful, but in this scenario, I don't like those dots showing up in my drawing. It does the same thing for like carpet. It'll put little hatch patterns for carpet, and I don't like it. So I'm going to override some of the visibility and graphics options. So to do that, you can either click on visibility and graphics here or keyboard shortcut VG. And these are all of the visibility settings for just the ground floor floor plan. This is not for the entire model, it's just for this one view. So I'm gonna scroll down until I see floors. And we then can override any of the settings related to the floor. So in this case, I want to override the fact that there is a pattern on the floor, on the projection or the surface of the floor. So I'm going to click on override, and I'm just going to say, please don't be visible. And then when I click on apply down here, we can see that those little specks go away. Not a like required super important part, but these are just things that like I like to do, and a little bit of why I was hired was to show the things that this is what I would do if I was in your shoes. Another thing that I really like to do is I like to apply a solid fill hatch in the walls. So I have that poché there for us automatically. And so that's if I scroll all the way down to walls, this would be the cut pattern. So all the way on this side of it, I could say I want to override that cut pattern and I want to make it a solid pattern. And then color, I usually pick this gray. I think this gray is too dark in my opinion. And I like that gray. I could find an own custom one, but then I have to make sure I use that same number code when I go on level 2. And so I usually just pick that one. And then when I hit apply, now my walls have a solid fill to them, and I don't have to do anything related to a hatch. We'll notice though, when we go on the upper level, that it doesn't have any of those settings, because those were settings that I only applied to the level 1 floor plan. We could make our own template in which those settings are already predefined in there. And so when we do our commercial practice, I'm gonna give you guys a template file that I already have some of those settings applied within it. I already have a paper space and everything set up. I even have some custom walls built out and everything. So on the upper level, we're going to need to make a floor again. So I'm going to go into the floor tool up at the top. This time I don't want to make a concrete metal deck floor. I'm just going to make a generic 12-inch floor. So I'm just going to switch my floor type. And I could also use the pick wall option of saying that I just want a floor that goes from this wall to this wall to this one. I don't have a wall to pick over here, so I could come in and use this line option to just draw one in here. When you are creating a floor, this magenta line work has to be a closed box. There cannot be any overlaps. There cannot be like, I can't put like a little break right there. It has to be a closed box, because if I try to make this floor, it's going to tell me these lines are overlapping. You can't do that. If I didn't have these corners meet, it would tell me you can't do that. These two lines here that are showing up are representing the span direction. So in this building, realistically, the span of the joist should be going across this way because of the fact that that's a much shorter distance. I can't really have floor joist span across this long piece. But we're not going to hyper focus on things like that in this one. You can change it though by clicking on span direction and picking the line that you want to redefine it with. And then I'm going to say, cool, please make my floor. And it's going to ask, do you want to attach the walls underneath it to the floor's bottom? So what it's asking is, I have those walls on level 1 that are 10 foot tall, or on my ground level, going up to my upper level. They're 10 foot tall. And then on my upper level, I have a 1 foot thick floor. So they're kind of intersecting. And it's just asking, do you want me to shorten those walls to the floor bottom? So I'll say, please attach them. It's warning me right now that the curtain wall I have sitting on this back side is like gonna not have its current grid anymore if I do that, which I'll say, that's fine, just get rid of that grid. And then if I look at it 3D, I have now, it adjusted that grid and I've now got a floor sitting in here. We're going to run into a little bit of a snag when we go put our staircase in tomorrow, but it's going to be a snag that we can easily solve. And next, we're going to have to make our roof, or some people pronounce it rough. There's one guy on YouTube that I do recommend for Revit videos because he was a high school teacher, and so they're very simplistic Revit videos, but he says rough the entire time. And I was like, what are you doing, Dave? Stop this. I was like, oh no. So for our roof, we can do it in a floor plan view. We can make a roof in a 3-dimensional view. You can also put a floor in the 3D view as well. I don't like to do them that way, but they can be done that way. And if you find it comfortable to do it that way, please, by golly, do it that way. If you are going to put your roof in a 3D view, I would recommend clicking on like this view cube to like really just make sure you're flat oriented to the top. But I don't like doing 3D roofs. I may edit them when I'm in 3D, but I don't like doing them. I could also go into my roof floor plan. Problem is right now I don't see anything. The way I could fix it in the roof floor plan is I could change this underlay. Like we did in the upper level one, we put an underlay in. I most of the time go into the highest floor plan level I have. So in this case, it would be my upper level. And this is usually the floor plan I create my roof in. And we are going to use the roof command to place a roof. And when I click on that, it's going to bring me into a similar menu, just like when I am making a floor, in which I can define my roof based on the type of roof it is. And we also see here that we have a couple of options defining slope and an overhang. This building, if we look at it, doesn't have an overhang at all. It has, I guess, technically a little bit of an overhang on this side, but there is no overhang on this building. If we had an overhang, though, I could easily just put an overhang here of 1 foot, and then when I go to pick the wall, it's just going to start that roof boundary a foot away from the wall. And if I decide I want to move it more, I can hit escape a bunch of times and I could edit this witness and say like I want a 2-foot overhang. So you can have it do that overhang for you automatically, but we are going to have a 0 overhang. And what I'm going to do is click on all of the walls I want associated with my roof, and I need to just manually draw one in here. Or I could, up in my drawing tools, I could do pick lines instead of pick walls. And I could say that I want that line involved with it. Or I could have used the rectangle tool and I could have just drawn in a rectangle manually. A bunch of different ways I would get the same end result. A few settings we need to look at or adjust before we make our roof is the fact that right now the base level, so the very bottom part of this roof, is sitting currently at the floor of our upper level. So if we don't adjust this or change this base level to say I want it to be at roof, what's going to happen is our roof is going to be in the middle of our floor. It's going to look like it collapsed. I'm going to leave mine at upper level so that way when we finish it, I can show you that we can easily fix it if we need to. So I'm leaving mine at upper level. I'm going to hit this green check. Sure, I'd like to save my project. When it asks me this about highlighting that or attaching them, I'm going to click on Don't Attach because I'm going to look at mine 3D and I've got a little bit of a problem. My roof is currently sitting on the ground or sitting on my upper level floor. I can easily click on it and I can change this base level to say that I want it to go to roof, and now it's sitting up there. What is the other problem though with this roof compared to what we want? Yeah, this like front side and this back side. We want a gable style roof and we have a hip style roof at the moment. And that's because we didn't do anything related to the slope when we made this. So if I click on this roof, I can go and change it by then coming up to my menu and saying Edit Footprint. When I go to edit the footprint, it brings me right back into the menu of when I first originally made this. So all 4 of my roof edges currently have slope defined to them. That's why that little right triangle is there. So that's why it made a hip style. If I want a gable, I need to click on this line and I need to uncheck define slope. Or I could also uncheck it over here. And I'm going to click on this line on the back and I'm going to uncheck to define the slope. And then I can say make my roof, and now I have a gable style roof versus a hip style. If I wanted a shed style roof, I would just only have slope on one side. So I would get rid of slope here, and now I have a shed. Or if I wanted a flat roof, I would undefine slope on all 4 sides. Though technically, I actually draw flat roofs as floors, and then because then you can make them slope inward, because most flat roofs, or hopefully all flat roofs, are not actually flat. They have the tiniest bit of slope towards a drain, so that way you don't have a swimming pool. But I do want slope on these 2 sides. You can also then change that slope number too. So like right now it's sitting at 912. I'm just going to leave it at 912 because I don't think it looks bad. But if I wanted a different slope, I can change it there. You can too just pull on that grip and you can move it around. But if you do that, I recommend afterwards you like go in and actually change this to be like a normal number. Because again, your contractor's not going to like that. And if I'm at 115, 256, I might as well just make it 10. Like, I might as well do it. I don't know if you can. Like, I don't know if, honestly, tools have a measurement to that amount. But
They would so ignore you.
and I wouldn't blame them. So My last major problem is hopefully something you guys can kind of figure out or see. What's a little bit of an issue with this house? I have a giant gaping hole going through it. Not great. So to fix that, we want to attach our walls to our roof. I can do that individually, or I can also kind of get a lot of them done in one go. So if I click on this wall, I have an option now in my toolbar to say attach the top to the base. And then I can click on the roof and it brings that wall up to meet it. I'm going to Control Z to undo that though, so I can show you a way to make it a little bit faster. If I hover over this wall and hit the tab key, which my Revit teacher told me to hold the tab key down, don't do that, because then this is what happens. You just hit it once. You can select a chain of walls using tab. So if I hit tab, I was able to get all 3 of those in one go. Then I can do attach top to base, click on the roof, and it brings that roof or brings that wall up to the roof line. The same thing that I'll have to do, but just do separate for this curtain wall, is click on the curtain wall, attach top to base, click on the roof. It's just warning me that the grid system it had originally isn't going to work now that I've changed this height. So I'll say, that's fine, just make a new grid system. And now I've got it filled with that. Another way you could fix this issue of that big gaping hole, so I'm just going to detach that, is you could fix it by using this Edit Profile tool. So what Edit Profile does, it allows me to just kind of redraw this profile in. So I could delete that top, I could look at the building here, and I could redraw in like new lines of it going up, reaching that pitch, coming back down. And in this scenario, like, what's the difference? Doesn't really look like much. The benefit to attach top to base is that if I decide I want to move this roof, see how that wall came along with it when I moved it? This wall didn't. Edit Profile is handy, especially like if I'm trying to do like a cool little feature wall, or if I want like a part wall that follows along with a staircase, because then I could just draw a wall that has like a slant top to it. Oh, they overlap here. Oops. Lines must be in closed loops. Where was the opening? Where was my opening? Oh, I have a little wall line up there. I like to, when it warns you that lines have to be in closed loops, it also highlights where that opening is. So if I wanted this weird slant, I could have this weird slant. Why would I want it here? I have no idea. But there are scenarios where I would want a slant wall. I'm just going to reset this one and attach it.
You might put windows sort of.
I could do
down
that.
the staircase.
Or I could do something cool then too with like this slant part is curtain wall, this part isn't. I'm thinking more in a staircase scenario would be very helpful, but let me get rid of that real weird slant I've got there. One last thing then for today with this, but like hopefully kind of what you've have found a little bit from this software is like in an hour and a half, like we've made an entire building. Pretty much, we still have to dimension it, we still have to annotate it, but like it's a little bit faster than AutoCAD, because also like I've got my elevation's done. They're here, they're done, I don't have to draw them out. If I make a change to the elevation, if I decide I don't want a roof anymore, there'll be no roof in any of the elevations, so it's going to work a lot faster, but it does take a lot more effort to get used to it and learn it, because it is a brand new piece of software you're using. But the last thing I want to do today is add some doors to these curtain walls. If this is going to be like a little porch area that we have sitting out here, wouldn't it be nice like if we can actually go out there? Like maybe not hang out there because I've only got like 5 foot of space, but like just to be able to sit out there, wave to everyone like I'm royalty, maybe to like a door here from this sunroom area, somewhere to exit from there, so that way it doesn't feel like I'm an animal in the zoo. We can adjust these panels within a curtain wall to be different parts or different things. A building that I've modeled twice now in Revit is the Eames residence. And the Eames residence is pretty much just all curtain wall with a glass panels. Some of them are solid pieces of colors, some of them are doors. And so it was a whole just curtain wall building. If we want to change one of these panels to a door, it is its own specific process that is exclusive to the curtain wall door. So first, we have to come into the Insert tab up at the top, and we have to load in a family. That's job number 1. When we go to load a family, it takes us back into the very last folder we were ever in. Conveniently for me, it's this door folder where I have my curtain wall doors. But if I needed to get out of this folder, I'm just going to change this look in, and I'm going to go back into my English Imperial library. And that brings me back to everything else. And then I could go into doors. I am going to load in this door curtain wall single glass. And I'm going to click on that I want to open it. And it seems like nothing happens after I did that, but something did. It loaded it in. And then I want to select just the panel of this curtain wall, which is going to be a little tricky to do because I only want just this one pane of glass here. So what I'm going to do is hover over the edge of it, and then I'm going to use my tab key to kind of shuffle through until I see just this panel. Because I modeled this as a storefront, it currently is pinned in place, but I can easily just click on that little push pin and unpin it. So when it's pinned, I can't actually change anything about it. So I can unpin it, and then I can change it from being a glazed panel. I could make it into a solid piece. I don't know why I would want to do that in this scenario, but I could. That's what I did with the Eames houses. I made them just solid pieces. We can also make it just empty, or there's now this new option to make it into a door. When I turn it into a door in the 3D view, it looks like nothing happened. But when I go into my upper level floor plan, there's now this door here. And I'm going to flip which way that door opens because it would just make more sense. Yeah. Yeah. Did you get it loaded in already? Okay. Because I'm going to have to do the same thing on the ground level too. So you find the panel you want, hover over the edge, and use the tab key until you get just that one panel, and then you can click on it. You've got to unpin it first. So you got to unpin it, and then you can come over here to switch it to be a door.
How did you get back to all the families?
So to get back to all of the families is in this look-in area. You go back into this English Imperial folder. It has all of the different families. There is a website called Blocks Revit. There's an extension for Revit, rather, not necessarily a website. I find it to be a pretty helpful extension. It does, again, this one does cost money, but it's a plugin that has a bunch of then different components and different families that you could load in for it. And it's just built kind of in as an add-on. So I sort of like this one. And then, of course, too, like websites like Erman Miller, if I wanted to load in, I'll just even search Erman Miller Revit to make it easier to find. If I wanted to put like their chairs into my model, they have Revit families that I could download and I can insert, which we're going to do tomorrow when we do components and stuff. So there are a few couple of things here in this. None of it's too beautiful or too stylized. Enscape also had its own component library, which was pretty nice. Twinmotion, not sure. Again, I haven't done a whole lot of Twinmotion playing around with or messing around with. But these libraries too, this content library, this is yesterday when I mentioned it doesn't get installed by default when you put Revit on your laptop. So this is what I'm talking about. You don't get any doors when I think you get the one door, but you don't get anything else within it. Okay, so tomorrow we're gonna add in stairs and railing. We're gonna add in a site. We're gonna add in some components, so like cabinets, toilet, maybe a bed. Again, this is kind of a weird shaped house or a weird house, not many bedrooms, but we'll kind of plan and flesh that all out. And then on Monday, we'll look at how we would get ready to put this into a set of construction documents for documentation, a little bit of annotation with it. And then we will jump into the commercial project, which has a little bit more meat to it. But this is kind of just to get you a little bit ready for Revit and how it works. Because it's a cool software. I like it. Do you like it?
Pretty incredible.
I think it's cool how it's
You can stop